Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
And I really didn't deserve that introduction. I'd like to welcome all the new people here tonight for the first conference, and I'd like to welcome all the new people that are here in the first 30 days in Alcoholics Anonymous. I also would like to take the time to thank Carol for inviting me here in the committee. And, there was a time in my life I wasn't invited anywhere. And I never thought I'd come back to Prescott, Arizona. It's been a long time. I had a bad experience somewhere up there in the mountains in a little Mexican community many years ago. And it's just good to be here. And I can't tell you when those candles lit up, and my heart, and I looked at all the light, and I thought, each one of those are sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it kind of reminded me of when newcomers come into Alcoholics Anonymous and there's no light in their eyes, and then you watch them, and then all of a sudden the light comes on. And that's what the candle reminded me of. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1967. I'd like to tell you that I stayed in Alcoholics Anonymous from that time on. I didn't. I looked around Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 23 years of age, and everybody was very old. I mean, they were old. They were 35 and older, and they looked like they had one foot in the grave and the other in the banana peel, and I didn't want to be an alcoholic. And so I left Alcoholics Anonymous. I heard that you didn't drink in between meetings, and I thought that you were going to teach me how to drink, and I just couldn't wait around for you to teach me how to drink. And so I graduated from the program of Alcoholics Anonymous at that time. I am truly grateful to those people that keep calling you even though you don't want to be a member. But the gal that had taken me to the meetings at that time, her name was Carolyn C., and she kept calling me in that 8 months, so I chose to be out there. I'm grateful for that 8 months because it surrendered me. And that gal would call me about every 2 or 3 weeks, and I would tell her how much I drank, and she'd say, "I'm not interested in your drinking. I want to be your friend." And God, I longed for a friend, but the price to be her friend was too high. The price to be her friend was to sit in those hard chairs in those meetings, and I didn't want to be an alcoholic. And so I decided what it was a recruiting thing, and I would recruit somebody for you. And so I called this old friend of mine up in Long Beach, and I said, "Eileen, you're an alcoholic, and you ought to go to Alcoholics Anonymous." And I called the gal up, and she said, "Okay." And I called the gal up, and I said, "I found somebody for you." And she said, "Good, I'll come and get both of you." And that was not part of the plan. I couldn't tell her no. I mean, she had a whole year and a half of sobriety. How could I possibly say no to somebody who's sober for 100 years as far as I was concerned? And I went to a meeting that night at the Anaheim Club, and I went into that meeting. And after that meeting, this gal came up to me. Her name was Sue M., and she looked at me, and she said, "When are you coming back?" And I looked at her, and I pointed to that gal, and I said, "I'm not an alcoholic. She is. Look at her." Yeah, I am. But, God has always worked in strange and mysterious ways in my life, because from that time on, I would hear that woman say to me, "When are you coming back?" And when I was ready to come back to you, do you see, when I came to you the first time, the only time I could ever express anything was under the influence of alcohol. And it always came out very distorted. And I couldn't talk, and I hung my head down, and I felt so inadequate and so ashamed and so full of guilt and so full of remorse. And I knew that I could not live life without ever opening my mouth again. And so when I came back to you 8 months later, there was nowhere else for me to go. I weighed 85 pounds, I was malnutritious, and my liver was shot. And I called that gal I wanted to be my friend on June 16, 1968. And I came back in here, and I came in with a different kind of attitude. And I'd love to tell you that I came in with an attitude of gratitude. I didn't. I came in here in that alcoholic personality that I stayed in after that last drunk. And I came in here, and I walked around. And that meeting that Bill talked about, the Ohio Street meeting, I used to tell them at that group that God sent me to teach them patience and tolerance. I used to walk around my first year of sobriety. I give everybody the finger. I cussed you up one side and down the other. I threw chairs down in meetings, and I kept waiting for you to tell me to leave. And all you ever told me was to keep coming back. And I was so disappointed when I found out that you were telling everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous to keep coming back. I thought you kind of singled me out. I am truly, truly grateful to the people that were there for me when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. There were people who talked about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, And there were two people who talked about the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they talked about the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they also talked about cleaning house. I want you to know that I had one of the cleanest houses in Westminister until they found out what I was doing. And they said that was not the kind of house cleaning they had in mind for me. I understand today when the old-timer tells the newcomer to bring the body, the mind will follow, because I was 6 years sober when all of me came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I would come to meetings and I'd sit there, and all of a sudden my mind would wander out there. And I wondered where these steps were and how often I was going to have to run up and down them. I was totally convinced you had 12 hidden steps somewhere, and that was part of the punishment, where I'd have to run up and down these steps every day. And I used to think, my God, I'm never going to get another thing done in my life. I'll just have to run up and down those steps. And I went into a meeting, and this guy named was Jerry Froelich, and I ran up to Jerry this night, and I said, Jerry, where are those steps, and how often do I have to run up and down them? And he kind of looked at me real strange, but then in those days, everybody was looking at me real strange, you know. Yeah. He said, Annie, he said, you hear them every meeting, they're read at every meeting. He said, if you listen, he said, and if you apply them to the best of your ability, he guaranteed me that my life would change. Would change, and I listened to the steps that night, and I don't know how to share me any other way with you than to share what I had found in those 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want you to know that those steps have changed for me through the years, because I had this idea that you only did them one time, and that was the only thing you had to do was one time, and that's it. And it doesn't work that way, because I'm not the same person I was even a year ago. But when I hear those steps, the first step says we admit we're powerless over alcohol, and our lives will become unmanageable. Now, I could admit I was powerless over alcohol. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous because I drank too much coffee. In fact, I never drank the stuff until I got here. I could not admit my life was unmanageable. I never managed my life. I don't identify with drunks who manage their lives. I roared right through mine. I thought about something and I went and did it, and I suffered the consequences of it later. And so I have to tell you that today that I am powerless over a lot of things other than alcohol in my life. But I have taken the first half of that step 100% as far as alcohol is concerned. My life is unmanageable. I found out very early in my sobriety I should have gone into management. I could manage. Yeah. I forget that part in the big book. It says that God is the director and we're the agents. I always want to be the director and let him be the agent. And so I manage my husband, I manage my kids, and I manage the people I sponsor, and I have to remind myself my life is unmanageable. I got no business managing anybody else's life. The second step says that we came to believe that our power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, and I came to believe that power greater than myself restored me to sanity when I was about 9 months sober, when the obsession for alcohol was removed from me. Now, I've had a lot of bouts with confusion and a lot of crazy behavior, but I have not been insane enough to pick up a drink in the 21 years that I've been sober. I white-knuckled it the first 9 months of my sobriety, and every time you talked about drinking, I would say, why do you talk about drinking? Because I could almost taste it, and I wanted to drink so bad. And God removed that obsession from me when I was 9 months sober, so that's how I believe the second step worked for me. The third step, they want me to make a decision, and I don't know about you and your decision-making when you came to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I couldn't make a decision when I came here. If you and I were out to lunch and you were going to buy, I'd screw up a free lunch because I could not make a decision whether you should buy or I should buy. And they want me to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of something I cannot feel or touch. If you was tall, dark, and handsome, had a nice car, I'd make a decision real fast. If you're new here in Alcoholics Anonymous tonight, you're going to find out you joined a group of very narrow-minded people. And they told me that was not the kind of higher power they had in mind for me. I made a decision at that time in my life to turn my will and my life over to the care of people in Alcoholics Anonymous because you were doing something which a life that I couldn't possibly do. I was to do that until I was 2.5 years sober, and I was to be surrendered, and I really believe that Alcoholics Anonymous is a continuing surrendering in different areas of our lives. And I was to surrender my life. At a point I ended up at Orange County Psycho was where I ended, and I just couldn't go it anymore because I was so full of self-will. And I found something within me, a power greater than myself, and it was within myself. And I was looking for it, always looking for it out there somewhere else. And my life has never been the same. I'm not going to tell you that I've just walked hand in hand with God. I've strayed off the path a lot, but I know there's a power, and I know where it comes from, and I know what the source of power there is. And there's people in Alcoholics Anonymous who know, and those who don't know. And I hope to tell you that I am one that knows that there is a power greater than myself, and it is in alcohol. I decided that I wasn't going to do that fourth step because I was going to be an exception to the rule because my case was different. And there was a guy in my home group, and his name was John Brown. And Bill and I were talking about John today, and I think back on those years, and I think some of the people I was taking direction from, they were totally insane. They were more insane than I was. He was all of a year and a half sober, but I was afraid of John. And John came up to me one night after the Friday night meeting, and he got right in my face. You know those members you have in your groups that get right in your face with their finger kind of going, and he said, "Hey, kid," he said, "have you done the fourth and fifth step?" And I said, "No, John, I haven't, and I'm not going to." That's for those of you who drank for 15 or 20 years. I only drank for 10 years of my life, and I'm not as sick as you guys. And he kind of looked at me, and he said, "If you don't do that fourth and fifth step," he said, "the night of your birthday," he said, "I'm going to get up at the podium." He said, "I'm going to announce it all over Huntington Beach for them not to listen to you, that you're not working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want you to know that he put terror in my heart." That's what he did. And I left that meeting, and I just knew. They used to call me Crazy Annie, and they didn't do it behind my back. They came right up into my face and called me crazy. You know, the word sneaking around and saying, here she comes. They said it right to me. And I knew. I used to wear my hair bright red. You know, my hair is red again. I changed the color of my hair. I know it's an inside job, but every once in a while I change the outside in order for the inside to catch up. And so I used to wear my hair in sparkling cherry and flame. I used to mix those two colors together, and it was bright red, and I had a real bad mouth, and everybody knew when I walked into a room. So I knew that they would know I wasn't working the lousy steps. So I went home that night, and the next day I went out to Thrifty Drug, and I got my sponsor. His wife was my sponsor at that time, and I picked up all this literature paper for her. I got up different colors of pens and pencils, and I got no papers, and I got a ride over to her house on a Monday night. And I didn't drive for the first 4.5 years of my sobriety because I couldn't take that stupid little test. And I want to tell you, though, I hear people in Alcoholics Anonymous go and down in our area and they say, "I can't get to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous because I can't drive a car," or the DMV has taken my driver's license away from me. And I never had a problem getting to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, nor did I have a problem getting home from a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I learned very early in my sobriety that we all come in here and we're all loaded with guilt. We're absolutely loaded with guilt. And I used to give lists of names, and I'd always go through that list, and I would see who was sober longer than me or sober less than me, and it didn't matter. They had a couple of days more or a couple of days less. And I'd go through that list, and I'd get a lot of no's, but I'd get one, and I would say, "If you don't come and pick me up and I die from this disease, it's going to be your fault." Yeah. So I never had a problem getting to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. They were right there because they were so guilty. I want you to know that you don't try that with old-timers, because I did that once, and they told me to ride my bike or walk, you know, because somewhere along the line they lose that guilt, you know, it just stops, it doesn't work anymore. So I got to Lois's house, and on a Monday night I didn't go to step study, and I told her what we were going to do, and I handed her all this stuff, and she looked at me and she said, "What's this all for?" And I said, "This is, we're going to tell you all about it. You start writing." And she said, "I've done my inventory." And I said, "Now you get to do mine." And we kind of argued, and the only emotion I knew when I got here, I was very angry. And anger goes into a lot of things for me. Anger goes into a lot of fear. And so I argued with her, and she wouldn't do it. And then I told her that's what sponsors were for. She was supposed to do that for me, and she said no. And I went home, and the next couple of weeks I would call her on the phone, and she would say, "Write," and I would just hang up the phone. And I couldn't tell her when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I knew this was one of the secrets, and I had lots of secrets. And they tell me in Alcoholics Anonymous that we are as sick as our secrets. And I don't like to have secrets today because I don't want to be sick anymore. I want to get well. And I told her, I said, I have to be an exception to the rule because I do not know how to read, nor I don't know how to write. And she said, "Well, I don't care how you do it, but you do it." And I went home, and I made a lot of marks in that paper. And I know there's other people in this program of Alcoholics Anonymous have done great things with their lives. I did graduate from high school in 1983. It took you 15 years in order to get me calm enough to go to high school. And I did graduate from high school in 83, and I want you to know everybody in Orange County was truly, truly grateful that I wasn't going on to college. They took a sigh of relief and said, "Thank God, we're not going to go through this with her again." I'm really, really grateful because the people that came into my life back then when I was very new were school teachers, and they took an interest in my case. And because of where I came from and the setting I came from, and they didn't know anything about this, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with my alcoholism. It's got to do where I came from, and because the people were not aware of what was happening. I have a thing. They took me to all the psychiatrists, the educational psychiatrists, and I've had my head tested more ways than I care to tell you. And they found that I had a thing called dyslexia, and I had see everything backwards. and they also tell me that it's a perceptual problem. And they tell me that alcoholism is a disease of the perception. Now, I've got papers and tapes that tells me I've got this. Now, I come by mine real honestly. I don't know what the rest of you are doing here tonight. I'm really, really grateful that alcoholism does not choose its victims, and it doesn't really make any difference whether you have an education or you don't have an education, or you're overeducated or undereducated. If you have the disease of alcoholism, you have the disease of alcoholism. It's just that simple. I went to that woman, and I did that fifth step with her, and I'm absolutely, totally positive that woman pointed out some of my character defects. And I want you to know, when I arrived at Alcoholics Anonymous, I had no character defects. I didn't know what character defects were. It's really difficult to have character defects when you've got no character to start with, you know. And I'd like to tell you that I've got a lot of character defects today. And God has removed those character defects that stand in the way of me hurting myself or my fellow men. But I've got character defects today, and I like some of them, and that tells me I'm getting character in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And God only knows I need some character here. I'm going to share one of my character defects with you. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I became a thief. And I was sharing at a meeting one night, and there was a guy next to me who did a lot of hard time. His name was Rod. And I was telling him about the little things I stole, and he told me, he said, you are going to go to 6 months in Orange County Jail if you don't stop stealing. And I want you to know God removed that obsession for stealing from me. And I did not steal for many, many years until I was about 17 years sober. And I quit smoking. And I want you to know there's always an answer here in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's an answer for everything. You notice tonight I was smoking. Yeah. I'm not stealing today, folks, but I'm smoking. Yeah. And I took up stealing right after I quit smoking. And I started taking dentine gum, and I graduated from dentine gum to celery. And I'm in the grocery store one day, and I decided that I needed a stalk of celery because I shared this somewhere, and this woman said to me, I'm so grateful that you shared that, because she liked to steal radishes. And I told her, let's get together and we'll steal a whole bloody salad. And so I went to my sponsor and I said, God, if you've never been a thief, you have no idea what it's like. The palms of your hands start sweating just like when you were drinking, and you kind of get shaky all over, and you get that high, and you can't. It used to be just to swallow away, now it's just to steal away. And so I told my sponsor at that time, I called Mary and I said, Mary, I'm really getting obsessed with stealing. I'm stealing, celery and different little things at the grocery store. And she said, Annie, she said, you're going to have to go and talk to the produce man, and you're going to have to make an amends to the produce man that you're stealing the celery. And I said, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to the produce man to tell him that I stole the celery. I admitted to God and to another human being the exact nature of my wrong, and I'm not going to go do that. And she said, well, you're going to do 6 months in Orange County, so you're going to have to do something. So what I did with that, I like to grocery shop at 6 o'clock in the morning. I went to the manager and decided I better take care of this because I'm 17 years sober at this time, and I can't be going around stealing. And I went to the manager and I told him I had this terrible problem and I had this obsession, and I asked him if he'd walk around the store with me every day, and he said he would. And he kind of looked at me and he said, what do you like to steal anyway? And I said, everything. And so I would get to the store, and some mornings I'd say, I don't have it today, I'm okay. And he kind of looked at me real strange. I'm surprised he didn't get the guys with white nets come and get me. And this particular day, I'm standing at the check stand, and I ran back to get my dentine gum. And the guy, his name is Paul, and Paul looked at me and he said, we're on name basis, the checker and I. And he said, you quit smoking, Annie, huh? And I said, yes, I did. He said, I quit drinking. I said, you did? I said, I did that some years ago. He said, do you know Bill W.? And I said, oh, I know Bill W. And I just looked at him and I thought, Alpha Beta is always going to be safe for me again because I knew you were watching me. And I'll never, never steal a thing from Alpha Beta again as long as I live. Because there happened to be another member on the other side of that checkout stand. Step 7 has been a real difficult step for me, humbly asking God to remove my shortcomings. And where that shows up is in my home. And when I was about 3 or 4 years sober, and I was still running to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I still run to a lot of meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I was still real crazy, and I was abusing my husband, and I was abusing my kids, and I'd run into meetings, and I'd tell you what I was doing, and you would pat me on the back, and you would tell me it's okay. Though I wasn't drinking, and I'd go home, and I would take off my AA coat off, and I'd go in that house, and I'd go absolutely start raving mad. It's real easy to, with your shortcomings here in Alcoholics Anonymous, they don't show up here when people are putting their arms around you and telling you that they love you and they care about you and they have got your best interests at heart. And when you're home and you've got those kids and you've got that husband that's not doing everything the way you want him to do it, and my shortcomings show up there. I stopped chasing my husband with knives when I was 4 years sober because my 3-year-old came and said, Mommy, I'll get the knife for you. And it kind of was like somebody threw cold water in my face, and I thought there's something really wrong with this program that I'm supposed to be working here. And I, excuse me, I had to make some changes. I had to do some more work. I've had to do an awful lot of work on Annie. So this 7th step even today is really difficult for me because, you see, I've never been able to make a simple request. I've always made a demand. And so I have to really look at step 7. When things are not okay at home, they're not okay inside of me is what it is. And so I get short with those people at home. Step 8, I made a list of all person I'd harmed, and I put me on top of that list. And, you know, it's easy for me, even after all these years, you know, I get real hard on me, and I think that I should be doing better, and I should be such a place, or all those shoulds. And, you know, it's okay when you do your sneaky, slimy little thing. So now I've just taken the group inventory. Don't that make you feel good? But it's not okay when I do it. It really is not okay when I do it. And I have to forgive myself and remember that, you know, I'm God's child, and I'm doing the best I know how on any given day. I did go and I did make those direct amends wherever possible, except when to do so with them or others. I would like to tell you I take a written daily inventory, and I don't. The only time you'll catch me taking a written daily inventory is when something's repeating itself over and over. But I want you to know that I know how to promptly admit when I'm wrong today. And that's an entirely different attitude than it was when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. My attitude on that step was screw you and the donkey you rode up on. I used to stay awake nights. I was a pacer, and I'd stay up all night long. I hated old-timers. I hated them. I hated them with a passion. I knew they knew everything. There wasn't anything those old-timers knew. And they'd watch you in those meetings. And there was one guy in particular I hated so much, and I think I really want to get him. And I'd sit up all night long, and I would have the conversation in my head, and he'd say this, and I'll say that, and it'd go on and on and on. And one night I went to a guy, and I told him about this whole deal, and he looked at me, and he said, Annie, he said, they don't care. They go home, and they go to bed, and they go to sleep. And they don't give you another thought. And that really upset me. I thought, how dare they? How dare they go home and go to bed and go to sleep? So today I like to give resentments. I don't like to have them. It's much easier that way. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God, pray only for the knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out. That was a real difficult step for me when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason why it was difficult for me was because I knew about medication. I did not know about meditation. But I watched those old-timers in meetings, and they talked about how they meditated and how they cleared their mind. And I used to sit in this old big red chair that I had, and I put the big book under my arm. And I used to think all this knowledge was going to go up in my arm and into my head. This is how I was going to learn all this stuff. And I'd sit there, and I'd close my eyes, and I'd get into all these sexual fantasies, far-out sexual fantasies. I could use some of those today. Or I'd fall asleep, so I had to quit meditating. I had to give it up. It was really, really bad for me. So I asked somebody one night at a meeting, I said, what is meditation anyway? And he said, meditation in the Webster's Dictionary, the definition of meditation is a higher plane of thinking. Now, it's really difficult to have a higher plane of thinking when you're 8 and 9 months sober and your mind is still in the gutter. Today, I'd like to tell you that I do have a higher plane of thinking, and I believe I have a higher plane of thinking because I've been willing through the years. And in the last year and a half, I have faithfully worked that step every morning. I get up between 5 and 5:30, and I do half an hour of prayer and meditation every single morning for the last year and a half. And I used to just do it Monday through Friday, and I gave them Saturday and Sunday off. And now I do it Saturday and Sunday. I do it all 7 days. And I really have seen changes in my life, and I've seen changes in me and within myself. Because I really believe that step is to continue practicing and practicing and practicing through the years and, you know, not doing it and doing it. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I really believe that the newcomer is the lifeblood of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I want you to know that I need the old-timer in Alcoholics Anonymous. I need the old-timer to let me know that I'm going to get through some of the things I'm going to get through. When I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought that now that I was sober, that nothing was ever going to happen to me again, and that illusion had to be smashed. My sponsor told me that she got it all together once and she forgot where she put it. So if you're new here today and you expect to get it all together, I hate to disappoint you. It has got better, but I don't have it all together. My life is much better today, and I don't stay in the stuff as long as I used to stay in it. but there is difficulties in my life, and it's part of growing up. And I really believe there's areas in your life that you're okay in, that I'm not okay in, and there's areas in my life that I'm okay in, that you're not okay in. And we come together and we share it. And I need the old timers to let me know that I'm going to get through some of these rough spots in my life. Like I said, I do everything backwards. Now I'm going to back up here, and I'm going to tell you what it used to be like. And what it used to be like, I'm going to go back to when I was very young, and I want you to understand I don't blame these people, although when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a great blamer. I blamed everybody. I could not take responsibility for me. Today, I'd like to tell you that I take responsibility for me today, and that's because of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I go back to when I was born and raised in Ireland, and that gave me 2 strikes against me right off the bat. I'm not one of those Irish that's never seen the skies of Ireland. I lived there for 17 years of my life. In fact, all my people are still there, and I'm glad they're still there because I still can't deal with them. My father's there's 10 children, and I'm the 8th child out of 10. My father's an alcoholic, and I don't know that my father's an alcoholic until I come to you and I listen to some of the stuff that you talk about here, and I identify my father as an alcoholic. Because on Friday night, my father would go out, and he would come home, and he would beat on my mother. And I would remember as a young child upstairs, and I would put the pillow over my head, and I would pray to God that they would teach me about that God of punishment. And I still pray to him, and I would say, please let him kill her, or maybe she'll kill him, or maybe I will die. And I got the next morning, I had all these things going on inside of me, and what they were was guilt, remorse, and as a bad child for thinking all these bad things of my parents. I tell you about this part of my life because I really truly believe that if I hadn't found alcohol, I would have gone absolute stark raving mad. I really, truly, truly believe that alcohol saved my sanity until I came to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and through you people and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you've made me a whole person. I went to Catholic school, not because we were rich, simply because that's all there is in the part of Ireland I come from. And people have asked me, how come you didn't get an education if you went to Catholic school? And my reply at that time, many years ago, until I found out what was wrong with me, was I had frustrated Irish nuns. And I used to have psychiatrists cry when I tell them about some of the things that these nuns did to me. And I remember sitting with Mary Reagan one day, and I was telling her about all these terrible, terrible things that these nuns did to me. And Mary looked at me and she said, Annie, she said, you really had it bad. And she said, you know, I had German nuns, and they were trained by Hitler. So there's always somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous who's going to have it just a little bit worse than you. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says the brainstorms are not for us. And I had my first brainstorm in 2nd grade. I decided I was getting tired every morning when I went in for catechism because there was so much stuff going on in the household, and there was so much fear. Fear ran my life. I was absolutely terrified all the time. And every time that fear would come in, I shut off in my brain, and I couldn't memorize the stuff that I was supposed to memorize. And I decided this morning I was going to hit this nun before she hit me. And she asked me the question, and I couldn't answer it because I got afraid. And I shut off, and she grabbed a hold of me, and I up and slapped her with all the force I could, what a 2nd grader can do, and hit her right across the face. And there was a glass partition in this particular classroom, and Mother Superior just happened to be teaching that classroom that day, and she just happened to turn her head and just happened to see me do it. And I stood there, and there was 30 kids. The Mother Superior saw me hit this nun, and I stood there and said, I didn't do it. You know. Now, I was to do that until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got caught in some hairy situations, and I would stand, and I would look at you straight in the face, and I would say, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. I don't know who was doing all these things. It most certainly wasn't me. I could not take responsibility for my actions or my behavior. They moved me out of there, and they moved me to another grade, and they put me in front of these 2 statues, and I assumed I was supposed to pray, and I always say 3 weeks, and it probably was a week, but it felt like 3 weeks when you're in 2nd grade. And they wanted me to apologize to this class, and I stayed there, and I got tired of kneeling on these hardwood floors, and I went back up to this classroom, and I stood in front of all these kids, and I lowered my eyes, and I said I was sorry. And Sister had that round pointer sticking it in my back for me to say I was sorry loud. And I said I was sorry, and something else happened inside of me, and what happened inside of me was you against me. And it was always you against me from that time on. I left school. I was 13 years of age, and then I left school. And I had all those hopes and dreams that every other girl had. And I was going to find me a nice Irish fella and get married and have kids. And I am truly, truly grateful God doesn't answer stupid prayers. I found alcohol and I found boys all in the same week. My first drink was a bottle of cognac, and I was at a dance. And if you know anything about the Irish culture, you don't have to be any age in order to order a drink. They will serve it if you know how to order it. And this guy told me if I drank this half a bottle of cognac, he would give me a pound note, which was equivalent to $3 in your money. And the deal was I was to drink this half a bottle of cognac down, and I wasn't to stop. And I drank that half a bottle of cognac down, and I didn't stop. And I went into the bathroom, and I got very, very, very sick. And I threw up, and I came back out, and I said, give me my money. I would have done absolutely anything for $3 at that time of my life. I would have sold my soul for $3. And I went up to the bar, and I ordered me another drink, and I continued to drink. And I can tell you exactly what happened to me. That knot in the pit of my gut, and that fear that I had, and all of that stuff that went on in that household. And it didn't matter whether my father beat on my mother. It didn't matter whether I had no education. It didn't matter there was no food in that house. I found the secret. Now, I didn't drink every day from that time on, but I drank at every opportunity from that time on. By the time I was 17 years of age, my father made a decision for me. I had absolutely nothing to do with this decision. And he decided I should come to California. Now, I'd never been anywhere in Ireland. As far as I ever got in Ireland was Dublin to the zoo. And all of a sudden, he sent me to the other ends of the earth. I am truly, truly grateful. Today I understand that I had to come from a power greater than him, because I would have died in that country. I know I would have died. They would have enabled me, or they would have put me away and locked me up, and I would never found Alcoholics Anonymous. So I see today, when I look back, I see how God has always had a hand in my life, even though at that time I didn't believe that, I didn't understand it. I remember my first thought was it was all going to be different, and I didn't know that that was alcoholic thinking. I knew that once I got away from this terrible, terrible family, I was never going to tell a soul I was Irish. Never. As long as I lived, I was never going to tell a soul I was Irish. I had a brogue like I stepped off the bloody boat, but I wasn't going to tell anybody I was Irish. I want you to know that I like being Irish today, because I really believe that if it wasn't for us Irish, it could hold your AA meetings in a phone booth. Now, I know there's a lot of people who object to that. You don't have to be Irish in order to become a member. It just helps. My sponsor told me one time that the reason why God created whiskey created whiskey and the Irish drank it is because he was afraid the Irish were going to take over the world. And so he thought he'd give us a little, fire. My aunt took me up to Dublin and filled out all these papers and got me ready to come to this country. I do have people in my family who know how to do that. And I remember getting on that plane, and I was drinking champagne, and I remember the feeling, and the feeling was freedom. I wanted to be free. And I knew it was that family, and I knew if I was free from that family, it was going to be different. And I was never to feel that feeling again, because it was a feeling of a false feeling of freedom behind alcohol, and I was never to feel that feeling again until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want you to know my freedom has come very slow here. I want you to know tonight, I really believe for me, in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm not in bondage in anything or anyone. I want you to know that I'm a free spirit in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I know today that I'm free inside. Nobody owns me, and alcohol doesn't own me. I came to here, and I lived in a family up in Palos Verdes the next couple of years, and they were a very, very nice family, and I was very, very impressed. I was impressed with her home, and I was impressed with her bar. She had a beautiful bar. She used to drink 108 proof vodka, and I used to drink 108 proof vodka. I'd fill that bottle up with that good mountain water that she was buying, and then when she drank it, she couldn't understand how come she wasn't getting a buzz on while she was drinking her mountain water. This woman was very good to me, and I did go back and make an amends to these people, and these people were truly grateful I found the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. They knew there was something wrong with me, they just didn't know what. This woman took me down to Redondo Beach High to go to school, because she never got our messages, and she thought that maybe it would be nice if I go to school. And she took me down to Redondo Beach High, and I'm standing outside that door, and I've got the shakes, and I didn't know that I was shaking from some of the stuff that I drank the night before. And I also shook because I had so many secrets, and I didn't want anyone to know anything about me. And I was always running down alleys and always hiding and doing all those things. And I knew that I couldn't tell her that I was terrified of my peers, and I couldn't tell her that I couldn't fill out those papers, and I couldn't even sign my name. And I stood outside that door, and I was going into a catatonic state of mind with absolute sheer fear. And I kind of slid down that door, and she looked at me and she said, "You don't have to do this." And I didn't have to do that. I started running around down the beach pier, and I started running around. A lot of people use a lot of hard drugs, and I never got involved in drugs. And the only reason I didn't get involved in drugs was simply because I was terrified if I was caught, I would be deported back to Ireland, and my father would meet me at Dublin Airport and kill me first and ask questions later. My father caught me smoking when I was 10 years of age. And as I'm standing there and I'm telling him I'm not smoking, and he's ramming that cigarette down my throat. And he took a dog's leash to me, and he whipped me, and he kicked me. And my mother ran into the living room, and she said, Jack, you're going to kill her. And he said, yes, I'm going to kill her. She's no good and never will be any good. And they couldn't let me out of that house for a couple of weeks because I was black and blue all over my body. And they didn't let me go to school because they were afraid that they might get reported. I don't know what they would have done in that country. But memory stayed with me, and I knew that if I was deported out of this country because of drugs, that man would meet me at Dublin Airport and kill me first and ask questions later. I moved on uptown at this time of my life, and at that time of my life I used to wear rubber go-aheads. And the other thing that I'm truly grateful about being in Alcoholics Anonymous, today I had a shower. Today I got clean clothes on. Today my makeup's all in the right places. And I don't ever want to forget that that's not always the way it was. My eyebrow's not on my cheek, and my eyes are not black and blue from someone beating on me. And I used to walk along, I used to wear rubber go-aheads and no pair of jeans and no sweatshirt way before they were ever fashionable. And I'd walk along Catalina Avenue and I'd give all the cars a finger. I hated everybody. I didn't want anything to do with you Americans because all you ever talked about was education. And now whether you did or you didn't, in my mind, that's what I heard. And I didn't want to do anything to do with the Irish because all they did was change addresses and they behaved the same way here as they did over there. And so I took the lesser two evils. I started running around with Mexicans. I started running around a group of Mexicans, and this guy, my best friend in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is Angie, who is also my sponsor today. And Angie and I years ago sat down and we kind of dissected the two nationalities, and what we came up with, the only difference between the Mexicans and the Irish is that we ate potatoes and they ate beans. You know, it's the only difference. They drink hard, love hard, beat the hell out of you on Saturday night, whether you need it or not. I also want you to know at that time of my life what I was drinking. I drank everything and anything anybody ever bought me, but when I bought, and I'd walk along those streets with that paper sack, and I don't consider myself, I used to buy Ripple. I don't know if you get any Ripple drinkers up here, but if you have never drank Ripple, you have really, really missed the trip. Because you get two drunks for the price of one. You drink water the next day and you're drunk all over again. Time is it? I started running around with this group of Mexicans, and they used to call me Annie the Irish Mexican, and I learned to speak Spanish like I was a native to their tongue, except it was all the swear words. I'd long left these people, and this guy had introduced me to the morning drink. And I moved. I took several geographicals over. I ended up over in Gardena. I ended up one day, I got to thinking, and Norm Alpe always said when he talked, God rest his soul, he used to say, when you drink, don't think. And I got to thinking one day that this guy and I had been running around long enough, we ought to get married. And I hitchhiked all the way over from Gardena to Torrance, Lameda to find him. And I found him and I proposed to him. I want you to know it took a half a gallon of Red Mountain wine in order for me to get the courage to go do that. And you could smell me way before you could see me. And I proposed to him. And he told me that he wouldn't marry me if I was handed to him on a silver platter. I ended up, that night I decided I was going to kill him. Now, I never owned a driver's license until I was 4.5 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got him in the car that night, and I decided that one less Mexican in this world, we'd all be better off. And you see, I know that I have got enough anger in me, or had enough anger in me, that I'm capable of doing anything under the influence of alcohol. I have also had to deal with that kind of rage in my sobriety. I ended up getting them on the Harbor Freeway, and I turned the car on the Harbor Freeway, and I took 25 feet of the guardrail and went down 30 feet in the embankment, and I thought I killed being Mexican. Now, what I learned out of that, folks, is if you're going to kill one Mexican, you've got to kill the whole family. For some strange reason, they don't take too kindly to you messing with their people, even if they do call you Annie the Irish Mexican. I also learned that when you run with Mexican people, you don't ever yell cop. And I yelled cop one night downtown Long Beach. I was in a telephone booth, and he kicked the door, and he kicked me, and I yelled uncle. And you see, I have no illusions. There's not something missing in my head. Normal people go home and they run. I crawl out of that phone booth and I go to the bar you're at, and I said, let's have a drink and we'll discuss it. Because you see, I learned in that inventory that I will stay somewhere forever because I'm absolutely, totally terrified of being abandoned. I'm absolutely, totally terrified of someone leaving me. I also learned in that inventory that any relationship, whether it was man, woman, or child, that I ever got involved in, somehow I always got hit. And there's something in me, it talks about in Step 8 in the 12 and 12, about bringing out the finer character defects in other people. And I brought out the finer character defects in other people, and there was a part of me that I wanted you to kill, and I would antagonize you in order for you to hit me, and you would hit me, and I wanted you to kill that part of me, and I found out here in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you kill that part of me, you kill all of me. I ended up here in Prescott, Arizona, somewhere in Prescott, Arizona, somewhere up in the hills, and I was very drunk and very belligerent one more time, and I said something to this guy's wife, and I went out of the bar, and I went into the back seat of a car to pass out, and 4 Mexican men came out after me, and they pulled me out of the back seat of the car, and they worked me over, and they worked me over good. I used to sit up at night. When I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I couldn't sleep for a long time, and the nights I did sleep, I had terrible, terrible nightmares. And this one guy said, I'll go get the truck, and we'll run over her, and he went and got the truck, and these 3 guys have got me down on this dirt road. And as the headlights come, these 3 men jumped, and they ran, and I don't know where I got the sense to roll off that dirt road, but I rolled off that dirt road, and that truck went by me. And I got up off of that dirt road, and my hair is full of gravel, and my face looks like a mag truck has run over it, and I wanted to drink. And I'm somewhere here in Arizona, and I have no idea how I'm ever going to get back to California, because, you see, I'm the type of drunk. I live by 4 mailboxes, a Ralph's Market, or some sign, and, I just don't know where I'm at. And I walk along the dirt road, and the guy comes along, and he picks me up, and we go to a liquor store, and we go to a dirty motel, and that's how I learned to solve my problems. I have no idea how to solve my problems until I come to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I came to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, you talked a great deal about dying. I know what it's like to die. I know what it's like to die when you're out there drinking. I also know what it's like to die when you're in here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you're sitting there and they tell you that you have to let go of all your old ideas. And every time they would say you have to let go of all your old ideas, a little part of me would absolutely die. I knew where my old ideas took me. I most certainly did not know where your new ideas were going to take me. I am truly, truly grateful to the people that were there for me when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, that knew how far down that snake pit I'd gone and started to spoon feed me Alcoholics Anonymous. And I am really grateful that I tried some of your ideas, because I don't know, I would have missed a whole lot if I had not tried some of your ideas. I had to learn to trust you, and my life has changed tremendously. But when I was out there drinking, I didn't know that. And I ended up in Gardena. I ended up in a little room. I used to call it my 4x4. And the only time I was ever relieved from what was going on inside of me was when I was under the influence of alcohol. And in this little room, you had to go down the halls to take a shower. And I never took too many showers because I was so full of fear, and I'd start drinking to overcome the fear. And I'd always overshoot the mark, so I never got down the halls to take a shower. I remember in this little room, I remember lying on the bed one night. I remember curled up, sucking off a vodka bottle, just screaming out loud if I could find somebody to understand me. Just one lousy person I wanted to understand me. I remember putting on those old pair of jeans and those old rubber go-aheads and heading out in the streets. And I want you to know, yes, I always found somebody. Yes, I always worked for a very brief time. Yes, it always ended up the same way. I'd have kicked out of a car, kicked out wherever we were at, and I always ended up, I was left to me and my own self one more time. I never asked for rooms full of people to understand me, and today I've been understood beyond understanding. And I know today that when I walk into an Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm safe and I'm home and I'm free. At that time in my life, I ended up, 2 people came into my life, and one gal moved me out of there, and she moved me over to Long Beach. And I spent a little time on Anaheim Street in Long Beach. I was down there for about 8 months of my life. And the gal that came off of Beacon Street, and these are not really good areas to be coming off of. And while I was down on Anaheim Street, this guy came down there, and he said he was sightseeing. And I asked him, he asked me to go out. Now, I want you to know I was in no shape to go out with anybody. But he asked me to go out, and I asked him if he had a job, and he said no, he didn't work. And I said, I don't date guys who don't work. You got to find himself a job. Yeah, I had a lot of nerve in those days. And he went out and got himself a job, and he's been working ever since. And I've been married to this man for 24 years. And I'd like to tell you that we've climbed the 12 golden steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and everything has just been absolutely heavenly bliss. And I'd be standing up here lying through my teeth. I would like to tell you that I don't mention him too often on the podium of Alcoholics Anonymous anymore. I just tell you that we have this strange and beautiful relationship. He's strange and I'm beautiful. And I do have 3 beautiful children from this man, but he ended up, I had to have him prove that he loved me, and he comes from a very quiet, from Minnesota, very subdued family. They don't fight and don't argue, and I come from an Irish family that when they express emotion, they express emotion, and when they're telling you they love you, they're usually throwing you across the living room or beating the hell out of you. And so I antagonized him that he gave me 2 the nicest shiners I ever owned, and I knew that we were in love and we would have to get married. And we got married and we moved back to Minnesota, and I wasn't impressed with his family, and I thought that I was going to drink in a manner I always wanted to become accustomed to, and he started to take bottles out of my purse, and he started to dump bottles, and he started to have met his parents, and both his parents are dead today. And I really liked his mother and father, but it took a long time in my sobriety to learn to do that. His mother didn't drink, she didn't smoke, she didn't gossip, went to church on Sunday, and she didn't screw around. I had absolutely nothing in common with her. Yeah. I liked his sister, and I liked her very, very much, and she just celebrated 20 years in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in September. Her and I got along real good. I left that little town 5 months after we were married. I decided that I had made a terrible mistake. I ought to get back to California and find that Mexican that really loved me. But I had another one of those brainstorms, and that brainstorm was if I had a baby. You know, when you have a baby, you automatically grow up. And I got pregnant, and 5 minutes after I'm pregnant, I didn't want to be pregnant anymore. You know, they lied to me. Children can't raise children. There was 5 girls in that apartment building. The doctor I went to put me on beer and wine. I used to have 1 glass of wine a day and 1 beer a day. And I was having a 6-pack a day and half a gallon a day. You know, that girl is 23 years of age today, and she's terrified to drink. She's absolutely scared to death to drink because she thinks, you know, because I drank the whole 9 months with her, that she's going to end up a full-blown alcoholic. Chances are she might. The 5 girls in that apartment building went in and had their babies, and I knew that, and they came home and they were happy and full of joy, and they had to be normal, and I knew it was going to be that way for me. And I went into the hospital and I had that baby, and they put that baby in my arms, and I'd like to tell you that I had an overwhelming feeling of love, and I was going to take care of her, and I didn't. I had an overwhelming feeling of responsibility. And I took that baby home, and I wanted to be a good mommy. I wanted to be a good mommy. I don't know what a good mommy is even to this day. I gave that idea up a long time ago. But I wanted to be a good mommy, and I took that baby home, and I very quickly got into abuse. I was abused, so therefore I'm going to abuse mine, and I didn't know that at that time. And many, many nights my husband had to take me off of her, and many, many nights I would leave her and I'd be gone, and I was still out there running those streets and doing the same thing I was when I was single. I was doing the same thing married. I told my husband he got me a little house, and he got me this little house when we moved, and things didn't change. And then he gave me an ultimatum. He told me if I didn't do something about myself, that he was going to take that little girl and he was going to go back to Minnesota, and he never wanted to see me again. And that was the first time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I left Alcoholics Anonymous in that 8 months. What he learned in that time that he went to those few meetings with me was that he had to let me go, and he let me go. He let me run, and he let me do, and he stopped chasing me down in bars, and he stopped trying to find me. And he let me lie on my own puke when I would lie there in that bathroom, and he wouldn't pick me up, and I just knew that he hated me. And on June 16, 1968, I sat in that living room, and I had been out drinking, and I had got beat up, and 4 people had taken me home and dropped me off, and I went in that house, and there was nobody there, and I called Ireland. I used to get telephonitis a lot, and I called Ireland for the last time, and my father hung up on me. And the neighbor came across the street, and she told me to come back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I knew that she didn't understand me here either. And she said, go back to Alcoholics Anonymous. She located my husband, and he came home, and he looked at me, and he turned around and walked out. I don't know what happened between 2 and the next morning, but something happened. And I sat there in this old chair, and I saw where I was going, and I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go back to Beacon Street in San Pedro or North Long Beach in Long Beach. And my husband sat in this chair, and he hung his head, and he was wringing his hands. And this little girl was standing there with her little diapers half off, and her little legs all black and blue, and her little eyes all sunken in her head. And I told my husband I was going to call that gal that wanted to be my friend. And he said, you go right ahead. He said, you've never completed anything in your life. He said, and you won't stay there either. And I said, I'm not going for you, and I'm not going for her. I got to go see. I can't live in my skin no more. And I had to call that gal that wanted to be my friend, and she came and she took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want you to know all I wanted you to do for me when I came here. And I would have been enough, but I've got so much more. All I wanted you to do for me when I came here was please stop my head from racing, take the knot out of the pit of my gut, and make the shakes go away. And I went to that meeting, and I sat in my hands, and I sat by the door because I was being so sick the night before, and I was shaking so bad, and I wanted to drink so bad. And the man stood up here like I am tonight, and he told me what I suffered from. And I never knew what I suffered from. He told me that I had a 3-fold disease. There was an allergy of the body coupled an obsession of the mind, and I was spiritually sick. He told me that it was the first drink that got me drunk, And I never knew it was the first drink that got me drunk. I always thought it was the sixth or the seventh drink that got me drunk. He told me that if I went to meetings the same way I drank, I'm a daily drinker and a periodic drunk. And I left that meeting that morning, and I'd like to tell you that I didn't want to drink again, but I wanted to drink more than anything in my life. I wanted to drink. I could taste it. And I knew that the thing that you hadn't done for me, you hadn't stopped my mind from racing. You hadn't taken the knot out of the pit of my gut, and you hadn't made the shakes go away. And I knew that if I'd one lousy drink, it would stop my head from racing. I would take the knot out of the pit of my gut, and it would make the shakes go away. But I heard the man say, if you don't take the first drink, you won't get drunk. And I went to another meeting. I was 9 months sober and 9 months pregnant, and I gave birth to a baby boy. And I'd like to tell you that I brought that baby boy home, and I was going to be a good mommy, because it was going to be different now. I'm sober, and sober mommies are good mommies, and I couldn't do it. And I started to abuse that child, and 2 years sober, I went home to Ireland, and I was pregnant, and again, I found out what causes it, but I'm not willing to give it up, so don't get any ideas. I got 3 children. I had a great sponsor at that time. I don't know how this woman ever put up with me. She was always at my doorstep, and she had 5 children of her own, but she was always there. Every time I called, she would be over there, because it was absolutely insane. I want to tell you how I found God in Alcoholics Anonymous for me. And I ended up, when I was 2.5 years sober, I ended up beating my son. And I'm not telling you this because I'm proud of it. I'm telling you this because if you're having trouble in your program, it takes so much time for us to change. At least it took with me a long time for me to change some of the things that I needed to change. I didn't know how to change. I tried. I did all the steps. I did all the things I was told to do. I couldn't let you come near me. I was so afraid of you, and I felt so different. And I could have felt so different. My case could have been so different. I could have different myself out the door. And for some reason or another, God has always had his hand on me. But I beat my son, and I beat him, and I beat him till his eyes rolled back in his head. And this man came to my door, those coincidences. And those coincidences still happen for me today. And he was 10 miles away from his home, but he came to my door for a cup of coffee that day. And he took that baby away from me, and he told me to call somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I called Mary Lee, and Mary Lee came and got me. And I went down to a meeting, and I heard the promises, and I knew the promises because they read those promises at meeting. And I went in that meeting, and I asked you to help me. I said, someone's got to help me. I can't live like this no more. I can't live and do the things I'm doing to my children. I can't live with all this emotion. I felt like I was stark naked, and I couldn't cry when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Tears was not part of me. There was a guy in my home group, his name was Walt Stiles, and every time Walt got up on a podium, he'd cry. And I used to sit in this chair, and I would feel the slump come up to my throat, and I'd swallow real hard, and I wasn't going to cry. A guy held me one night while he punched my face, and he wanted me to cry, and I said, you go right ahead and you kill me, son of a bitch, because I ain't going to cry. There was no tears left in me. I felt cold inside. But I went in that meeting, and I said, you promised me. You promised me. You promised me that fear of people would leave me. You promised me that I would know peace of mind, that the economic insecurity would go. And I'm worse off now than I was when I came to you 2.5 years ago. And somebody said something in the meeting, and I threw a chair down, and I ran. And a lady came out after me. Her name was Edna, and she grabbed a hold of me, and I started to cry. And I know today why we have tears today. And I lay in that woman's arms, and I cried, and I didn't think I'd ever stop crying. And I knew that I would just be a pool of nothing. There would be absolutely no personality. There would be absolutely nothing. And that woman took me to Orange County Psycho. I didn't stay at Orange County Psycho, but she took me out there. I want you to know that when it talks about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, if we're painstaken about doing these things after step 9, and it says that some of us have felt that we were reborn. I want you to know that I was reborn that night in that woman's arms. That woman gave me life. In 3 months, she was 9 years sober, and 3 months after she gave me life, she chose to commit suicide. And to this day, I mention Edna every podium I ever stand at. To this day, I don't know why Edna committed suicide. For some reason or another, I'm not supposed to know, because nobody in Huntington Beach has ever known what happened. And Edna took me out to Orange County, and I didn't stay at Orange County, like I said. But I went into a group of women who were child abusers, and I was trying to learn not to abuse my children and learn to deal with some of this stuff that I needed to deal with. And I ended up running from that because they were going to take my children away from me. And the psychologists, and I'm not here to give you a plug for psychology, but my big book says that those professional people are there to help us. And this man called me and he said, I want to help you if you're willing to come out here. And I went out to that man, and I went to him twice a week, and I went to him for 2.5 years, not twice a week, but the first couple of months I went twice a week. And I want you to know that I really believe that I would not be standing before you today if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous and that man at that time of my life. And he told me that I wanted somebody to love me, and I was absolutely totally convinced there wasn't anybody in this world that loved me. I aggravated the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I tested your tolerance at every opportunity I could. And I said, there isn't anybody that loves me. And he said, there's got to be somebody that loves you. And I said, there isn't nobody that loves me. And he said, what about those people in Alcoholics Anonymous? And I said, those people tolerate me because the only requirement for a membership is a desire to stop drinking. And I went home that day and I called that lady that was my sponsor, Lois. And I whispered in the phone and I said, Lois, do you love me? She said, Annie, I love you so much. Now, Lois had told me for 3 years, I'm sure on a daily basis, that she loved me. And she told me I was a child of God and that God loved me too. And I'm really one of those that believes we hear when we're ready to hear and we see when we're ready to see. And I hung up that phone, and I'd like to tell you that I did not abuse my kids from that day on. I had to learn to touch my children. I had 3 of the most beautiful children you'll ever want to meet. And I want to thank you. I want to thank the women in Alcoholics Anonymous that taught me how to be a mommy and taught me how to take care of my children. And the women in Alcoholics Anonymous that nurtured me because I needed so much nurturing. And they nurtured me, and I in turn was able to nurture my children. None of my children as of yet, and I always add yet, is into any alcohol or drugs as of today, as far as I know. And they've been raised in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous because you spoon-fed it to me, and I in turn spoon-fed it to them. I didn't feel that emotion called love. You talked about it here, and I didn't feel it, and I didn't own it. And the little gal came to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the Serenity prayer says, we accept the things we cannot change, and courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I accepted that I didn't own that emotion, that everybody else had it, and for some reason I wasn't given it. And it has to come to me in a feeling. If it doesn't come to me in a feeling, it is no good. And this little gal came and she asked me, I was 5 years sober, and nobody had ever asked me to be their sponsor. Used to tell those old timers used to get those newcomers and kind of move them away from me. If they were afraid I was going to contaminate them with something. And they'd say, you know, A is not Annie, she's really strange. And they kind of moved them down the line. And she asked me to be her sponsor, and I told her I would share with her what I found here with you. And I sponsor a lot of gals today in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they share the secrets of their heart with me. And I share my secrets of my heart with them. And I see me in all areas of their lives. And I see the struggles. And I know, like Jerry Frolick knew for me, that if I work the steps, it's going to be all right. He guaranteed me that I would be okay, and I'm okay today. And I took this little gal, came into the meeting this night, and she was hallucinating because she used a lot of LSD and a lot of drugs. Her name was Cindy. And she was sitting over by the door, and she was 6 weeks clean and sober. And I had to walk all the way across that room. And I walked across that room, and I took her out of that meeting. And I sat in the bathroom floor with her, and I held her in my arms, and I rocked her back and forth like a baby. And she looked at me with the bluest eyes I've ever seen in anybody, and she said, Annie, you love me so much. And I felt love for the first time in my life. The hair stood in my arms, and the tears ran down my face, and it was like electricity going through my body. And I said, my God, Cindy, I do. They had put 3 babies in my arms, 2 in sobriety, and I never got that feeling. My own children, I didn't get that feeling. And I started to cry, and you see, I'm one of those that believes there's not so much what I can give you, it's what God wants me to learn through you. And through that little girl, I've been able to love an awful lot of people. It's taken me a long time to love me, and I know the days that I love me, I love you that much more. And the days I'm not loving me, I don't love you, to be quite honest with you. I've done a lot of things in my sobriety. I've done a lot of things, and I can't stand here and tell you I've done a lot of things I'm ashamed of, because I really believe there is nothing that happens by mistake. I really believe that everything that's happened to me in my sobriety has happened to me because there's lessons for me to learn in those areas of my life. My oldest girl this year just graduated from USC, and she's got a job. And I looked at her, she's 23 years of age, and at 23 I was so messed up.
And she just went out yesterday and bought a brand new car and financed it herself and has a 4-year college degree. And I'm kind of looking and thinking, my kids are more mature than I am at 45. My son decided to go into the Army, and I got a good relationship with Ronnie today. It's always been a love-hate thing, and I always know that if anybody's going to if he's got the allergy to alcohol, and if he finds it, and he drinks it, and if he's allergic to it, he'll be off like a rocket, because him and I are very, very much alike. And but I love Ronnie very, very, very much. And he chose to go in the Army, and he's over in Maryland, and he's not doing too good emotionally, but we've been talking to each other on the phone. And I know that he's going to be okay. I know that he's going to be okay because he got a good foundation. He got a good foundation from the people in Alcoholics Anonymous and from me and from all the people that came to my house and through my house through the years. My youngest daughter just left, and she's down in San Diego going to school. And, I look at my kids, and I look back, and it's unreal. I could have missed it all. And it was a guy talking in a meeting the other night, and he said, some of the joys that we have in sobriety. I can't begin to tell you some of the joys, but you're going to have a lot of sorrow in order to have those joys, and I've had some sorrow. There's been several members of my family just passed away. None of my family is sober today, except my niece just came to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. She just celebrated a year in March, and she's the only one in my whole family. My father died in 81, and my sister and brother died in 84. My sister died in October the 23rd, and my brother died 4 months later, February 23rd. And but when my dad died in 81, before that I went home to Ireland, and I always wanted something from my dad. And I want you to know that I'm one of those that believes there's only 2 kinds of alcoholics in Alcoholics Anonymous, male and female. And I need the male in my life as much as I need the female in my life in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've had a lot of fathers here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've had a lot of brothers, and I've had a good relationship with a lot of men here in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've got a lot of good stuff from them, along with the women here in the program. But my dad, when I went home and when I was 11 years sober, I wanted him. At 2 years I had gone home, and he took a poker and he went to hit me because I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous while he stood there drunk out of his mind. And at 11 years I thought, now I'm good enough, now I'm okay. And I had expectations when I went home, and I wanted him to see that I was okay, and I wanted to hear him one time say that he loved me. My father was incapable of using those words because my father, God love him, he was so sick with his disease, and he tried so hard. And I love my parents very much. I know that today. I really do love them. And they did the best they knew how from where they came from. And sometimes the best is not good enough, but they did the best with where they came from. And he called us in the bedroom, and he told us that he hated us. And there were 7 of us home at that time, and he said, I hate every one of you. Every one of you are terrible, terrible mistakes, and every one of you should have been drowned at birth. And my brothers reached for a drink, and my sisters reached for a drink. I'd love to tell you I came from priests and nuns. I don't. I come from alcoholism. And I stood there, and it was like someone sticking a knife in my heart, and I don't ever want to be a mistake again. That was the word I heard, was mistake. All my life, until I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, and a long time after I came through the doors, I thought I was a mistake. And you told me that God does not make mistakes, and that I was not a mistake, and I never want to be a mistake ever, ever again. I read a lot today, and I found out what the old-timers told me many years ago in those self-help books, and I've read them all. And they told me that, every answer that I need is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they were absolutely right. Every answer I need is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I read, when I meditate, there's a book I read, and it's called Gabron, and the Prophet. And in there, there's a line in there, and it says that our children come through us, they're not of us. And you see, my children came through me, they're not of me. They just came through me, and I've just got to be there for them, that's all. And I came through those people. I'm not of those people. I'm of the people of Alcoholics Anonymous. You are the people. You're the ones that walked the extra mile with me when nobody else will walk with me. You're the ones that sat and held my hand when nobody else would sit and hold my hand. You're the ones that saw Nanny that nobody else could possibly see, and you pulled her out, and she walks tall with dignity today, because I am a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to thank you for allowing me to share me with you tonight. And if you're new here tonight, I hope you get 1/4 of what I found here in Alcoholics Anonymous. God bless each and every one of you.